Hello, and you are watching the Gripe TV. I am your host, JP Forte. What I want to get into is there's going to be a rally in Yellowstone for wolves about 10 days from now, and what this rally is about is speaking out against what is being done to wolves. I have written a speech which I have dedicated to this rally, and I am going to read it. My speech for wolves. First of all, I want to thank everyone who attended this rally. I am giving this speech to highlight the horrors and atrocities that our government is committing on wolves and other wildlife at the behest of certain special interests and against our will as citizens. How and why is our government doing this? The answers are simple, really. It all boils down to money, catering to special hunting and ranching interests, and because the government, for whatever reason, thinks hunters and ranchers are more American than the rest of us. Well, I got news for everyone. They're not. This dictatorship that hunters and ranchers have had over the rest of us on wildlife policy has gone on for too long, and it's time for all of us to stand up and say, no more. It makes me sick that in the eyes of this government, hunters and ranchers are some good old high-polluting, rootin'-tootin', gun-toting, hard-working real Americans, while the rest of us are second-class citizens. Never mind the fact that we also pay our taxes. It also outrages me that for years, hunters have harassed and threatened us, and the authorities have done nothing to protect us from them. But when people on our side have finally had enough and do to a hunter what hunters have been doing to us for more than a decade, we are the ones who get into trouble. If the United States is supposed to be a democracy, then why doesn't it apply to us? In the case of protecting wolves, have we seen any democracy? No, we haven't. All we have seen is abuse and a form of class discrimination. We are literally treated as second-class citizens compared to hunters when it comes to wildlife policy. In the words of a 1960s political activist named Malcolm X, and I quote, "We don't see the American dream. We have experienced only the American nightmare." This quote most definitely applies to us as it applied to certain people in the civil rights movement at that time. As anyone who loves and cares about wolves and wildlife knows, the past few years have not been good for the wolves that we are fighting to protect. The government seems bent on removing protections from these iconic animals so they can be cruelly and sadistically slaughtered en masse and maybe even wiped out again like they were in the 1930s, before they were once again reintroduced in the 1990s. The wolf populations are barely recovering, and the government's obsession with letting certain special interests slaughter and exploit these animals as well as other wildlife is insane. Our nightmare over the wolves began in 2008, when the Bush administration removed ESA protections from these animals, claiming that just 1,500 wolves in the northern Rockies was a recovered population. Never before in the history of the Endangered Species Act has any species been declared recovered at such a low population number and then immediately slaughtered at such a mass rate. There was a huge public outcry against removing protection from the wolves, which fell on deaf ears of government officials, and the delisting of wolves from the endangered species list moved forward as planned. Wildlife and animal rights groups challenged this decision to remove protections from wolves in the federal court, and were granted an injunction pending the proceedings, but not before 220 wolves were killed between March 28th and July 18th of that year, when the injunction was granted by the courts. It is very shocking that 220 wolves were killed before the injunction was granted and the proposed hunts planned for that fall hadn't even started. In September of 2008, the government backed out of the court fight and announced they were going to keep wolves protected, only to announce a month later they were planning on removing ESA protections from wolves yet again. A few days before the Bush administration left office, the wolves were once again delisted from the endangered species list. On January 20th, 2009, when the Obama administration took office, President Obama signed a motion stopping any of Bush's last-minute decisions from going through pending whether or not they would be overturned. At this point, many of us were hopeful Obama would do the right thing and overturn the wolf delisting. Here is a man who, while running for president during the 2008 election, told animal rights advocates that he acknowledged the link between animal cruelty and violence in human society, and that if elected, he would create a more humane administration for the animals in this country. Many of us voted for Obama to keep his rival John McCain's VP pick, Sarah Palin, out of the White House because of her horrific anti-wolf policies. We also voted for Obama in hopes of having a more humane administration for animals like he said he would do. After the election, how does Barack Obama return the favor to us for helping him get elected? I'll tell you. Once elected, one of the first things he did was turn around and betray his animal rights supporters. When appointing an Interior Secretary, which is the person who oversees our nation's environmental and wildlife policies, Obama appointed a man named Ken Salazar, despite being advised against that decision and to the disappointment of many. Interior Secretary Ken Salazar, who was appointed by President Barack Obama, is a trophy hunter and cattle rancher. He is also known for his ties to special hunting and ranching interests. During Obama's first term, he has literally waged an all-out war on our wildlife for his special hunting and ranching interest cronies. You know, it is very sickening that certain special interests, such as hunters, who make up only 5% of the entire public in the United States, are allowed to dictate wildlife policies over the rest of us. The so-called term of wildlife management is actually a fancy euphemism for allowing hunters to manipulate and exploit wildlife and their populations for the benefit of hunters. Think about it. Hunters are not out sadistically killing and slaughtering wildlife to get off on their sick killing fetishes for the benefit of wildlife, and this type of wildlife policy needs to come to an end, in my opinion. The excuses from the anti-wolf crowd, made up mostly of cattle ranchers and hunters, does not add up either. Ranchers like to push the notion that wolves are eating all of their livestock, yet public reports show wolves are responsible for less than 1% of all livestock losses, and ranchers also get compensation from those losses. Ranchers also lose more cattle to the elements of weather than anything else. So what are the ranchers going to do? Push for an open season on the weather next? Hunters claim wolves are decimating the elk, yet data shows elk numbers are doing just fine. The herds are just constantly on the move now. God forbid hunters should actually have to work to get an elk. I also love how hunters scream about how wolves kill elk. Ever see what a wolf does to an elk? Is one of their favorite lines. My response to that is, have you ever seen what a hunter does to an elk? The elk die by thrashing around, choking on their own blood after being shot. I also love the hunter's excuse of saving elk. Kill the wolves to save the elk, then turn around and shoot and kill the elk. What kind of lame brain ideology is this? If wolves were such a danger to elk, wolves would have wiped them out and starved out themselves thousands of years ago. Wolves take the weaker elk so the stronger elk survive and go on to breed healthier elk, while hunters take the biggest and healthiest elk for their best macabre trophies, leaving the weaker elk to breed. If anyone is to blame for a decline in elk numbers, it's hunters. Also, if the elk populations are in such danger, then why is it that hunters are killing them by the thousands? It doesn't make any sense. Another fact is that wolves have to kill the elk to survive. Hunters kill the elk for their macabre wall decorations. Anti-wolf groups have used every excuse under the sun to kill wolves. They have even gone so low as to making up stories of wolves stalking and attacking children at school bus stops, and they have even made up false claims of there being so many wolves that they are everywhere and they show up on every street corner. Man, I'd love to know what they've been smoking. I have friends who live in the northern Rockies who very rarely see any wolves in the wild, if they even see them at all. The Canadian wolf story holds no truth or bearing either. They are the same species that used to be in the northern Rockies in the past before they were killed off in the 1930s. Subspecies of wolves don't begin and end at national borders. The claims of the 1995 wolf reintroductions being forced on the public is not true either. The majority of the public in the United States wanted wolves back in the West, so none of the lies and excuses from the anti-wolf groups hold any truth whatsoever. Wolves have also benefited the Northern Rockies region economically. People who come to see wolves in the Northern Rockies generate well over $10 million annually in that regional economy, as opposed to the local hunters who spend a total of around $700,000 in hunting tags to kill wolves. So there is no economic value in killing wolves either. The behavior displayed by certain politicians, such as Idaho's Governor C.L. Butch Otter, is also very sickening, low-class, and unprofessional for a man in his position. In 2007, he told a group of hunters that he would bid on the first tag to kill a wolf himself. He also mocked wolf howls when he got the news that the wolves were delisted to be slaughtered. In a state like Idaho that has so many issues that directly affect its citizens, such as education, poverty, and so on, all this man and other Idaho politicians can think of is killing wolves. How disturbing is this when politicians are more concerned about killing wolves than actually doing anything that benefits citizens? To make matters worse, we have the same thing going on in Washington, D.C. It is literally like politicians are having a who can be the most like Sarah Palin contest, and the Obama administration takes the prize. The Obama administration is responsible for the slaughter of thousands of wolves, wild horses, and burros, denied protections for polar bears, and even tried to legalize whaling. Let's also not forget their handling of the BP Gulf oil disaster. So this is President Barack Obama's promise of a more humane administration. The wolves were the first victims of Cowboy Kenny Salazar, and the Obama administration has been after these animals ever since. On March 6, 2009, wolves were stripped of their ESA protections yet again. When Ken Salazar and the Obama administration removed wolves in the Northern Rockies from ESA protections, which led to hundreds of them being slaughtered by hunters and wildlife officials between September of 2009 and April of 2010, wildlife and animal rights groups filed a lawsuit to get the wolves back their rightful protections under the ESA. On August 5, 2010, then federal judge Donald Malloy ruled that the merits of removing wolves from their protections under the Endangered Species Act were illegal and ordered the wolves to be protected again. We all hoped the nightmare was over at this time, but it wasn't. The court ruling did not set well with wolf-hating politicians in Idaho and Montana, who continuously wrote and pushed for legislation in Congress and the Senate to make wolves exempt from having protections under the Endangered Species Act. Instead of worrying about fixing the economic crash, politicians were more obsessed with killing wolves. They seem to put out another form of anti-wolf legislation every week. Some congressmen and senators even got very nasty with wolf supporters when they called and wrote to them letters against any such legislation. Ken Salazar and the Obama administration even made backroom deals with wolf-hating politicians, along with special hunting and ranching interests, and told them that they would support and even urge Congress and the Senate to support this horrible legislation. Senator John Tester and Senator Max Baucus then slipped a rider to the 2011 spending bill, which was set to make wolves exempt from the ESA in the northwestern region of the country. During this time, certain so-called wildlife groups sold out the wolves by trying to make a settlement with the Obama administration to try to get Judge Donald Malloy to reverse his decision on wolf protection. Not only was this an act of betrayal to us, but it also made us look bad, which probably emboldened Congress to pass that budget bill rider even more. Senators who said they would fight against anti-wolf legislation then turned around and voted for it. On April 14, 2011, the budget bill was passed with the anti-wolf rider attached. Not only did it make wolves exempt from the Endangered Species Act in the northwestern region of the country, but it also included a clause in it that said that no part of this legislation shall be subject to judicial review. This is nothing more than a blatant act of abuse of power and dictatorship. Never in history has this ever been done, and it also has set a dangerous precedent for other endangered species to meet the same fate should they get in the way of special interests. A few groups that didn't sell out on the wolves tried to challenge the constitutionality of this budget bill rider. It was first challenged in Judge Donald Malloy's court. Judge Malloy himself was disgusted by this budget bill rider and said he would have ruled it as unconstitutional from his bench if he could, but his hands were tied to rule against it by legal precedent because it would have to be sent to a higher court. The groups fighting for the wolves filed the appeals to the higher court, only to be ruled against by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in March of 2012, which makes me wonder if the judges on that panel made their ruling fairly or if they were bought off. Regardless of what the ruling was, I still say for Congress to pass laws blocking the public the right to judicially challenge them is unconstitutional. After the wolves were delisted, the states moved forward with their horrific plans of hunting and trapping these animals. Hunters reveled in it, posting pictures and video of their cruelty and rubbing it in our faces. Many of the wolves killed were wounded or caught in traps before being sadistically tortured for thrills before they were finally killed by the hunters, and these hunters actually brag about it. In one incident, a trapper posed for a picture of himself, grinning in front of a wolf he trapped. The wolf not only had suffered agonizing injuries from a leg-hold trap, but had also been wounded from people shooting at it from the road. This wolf was bleeding and suffering horrifically from its injuries. The trapper posted the pictures and bragged about it in a hunting and trapping website. This is pure sadism, yet officials wrote it off as no big deal. There was even a poaching incident in Idaho where wolves and an elk were killed. Charges were filed for the poached elk, but not for the wolves. The gruesome and disturbing images of these sadists grinning over the wolves they tortured and killed has given me a perspective that hunting should be outlawed, and the dictatorship that hunters have over the general public needs to come to an end. I also find it disturbing that in the northern Rocky states, they want a population of just 100 to 150 wolves per state. Any other animal with a population that small would be critically endangered. Also, with a population that small, it would make it very easy for hunters to poach the rest of them, and with the behavior of certain officials, I think that's what they are planning on. There are many things officials are doing that points to a plot to make wolves extinct from the West again. Think about it. Why is it that in some of these states there is all year-round hunting with no quota? With over half of the wolf population in the northern Rockies slaughtered in just a couple of years, why do officials want to double up on the killing? It is a plot to wipe them out while letting these sickos who are hunting and trapping them get off on it, and we all know it. The Interior Department said upon delisting that they would review the wolf delisting within 5 years and determine whether or not wolves would need to be relisted under the Endangered Species Act. 5 years. At the rate that things are going, there won't be a single wolf left. The time to put a stop to this is now. The situation for wolves in the country and our nightmare over it has gotten worse and worse. Not just out here in the West, but in other parts of the United States as well. In December of 2012, Cowboy Kenny in the Obama administration also gave us a little Christmas present slap in the face by delisting wolves in the Great Lakes region. State officials have been letting hunters mass slaughter them over there too. The Obama administration also delisted wolves from the Endangered Species Act in Wyoming, where they can be shot on sight in most of the state. In the state of Wyoming, wolves can also be killed by any means, such as running them over, pulling them apart with horses, and any other torturous and sadistic way you can think of. Now the Obama administration is also planning on delisting wolves all across the United States in pretty much all 50 states. This includes the most endangered subspecies of wolves, such as the red wolf in the southeastern United States, and even possibly the Mexican gray wolf in the southwestern United States. And by the way, there is less than 100 of them left in the wild. It isn't very hard to see that wolves are not being removed from the Endangered Species Act because they are a recovered species or because of any right reasons. They are being removed from the Endangered Species Act so special hunting and ranching interests can once again exterminate them from the landscape like they did 100 years ago and cause the entire wolf species to go extinct. This is extremely disgusting and insane. I swear this obsession that certain special interests and politicians are having about killing wolves is making me wonder if they are mentally disturbed, mentally challenged, or both. Hunters and the politicians who serve them should be charged with felony animal cruelty, in my opinion. After what has been done to wolves, I have become a supporter of banning hunting completely. It has no place in the modern world to begin with. My heart breaks for the wolves over what is happening. It looks very bleak, and it also looks like there is no hope for the wolves anymore. There have been many times I have wanted to give up fighting for them, but I can't. Every time I go to the wolf sanctuary I work at, I spend time with a wolf I have a close bond with. Every time I look in her eyes, I feel like I am failing her and her kind, but then I think if I give up and do nothing, then I really did fail her and her kind. I have had a love and a passion for these animals since I was 9 years old. I have been an advocate for wolves since I was 16. I have dedicated much of my life to them. I also realize that unless the wolves are saved, and until they are safe, I don't feel that my soul will ever be at peace. As bad as things are right now, and as hopeless as it may feel, there are things we can do to fight back and possibly stop this nightmare once and for all. But it is going to take some battles and sacrifices on our part. To save the wolves and change the situation we are in, the first thing we as wolf advocates need to do is change ourselves. One of the biggest problems with people in wolf advocacy is there is too much infighting and a lack of unity. I have seen this on several occasions with wolf advocates developing personal issues against each other, and the next thing I know they are no longer friends and refuse to come together and work together to fight for the cause. This has to stop. When this happens with us, it's the wolves that suffer more than we do. Wolf advocates don't necessarily have to like one another, but they must band together and become unified regardless of how they feel about each other for the benefit of the wolves that we want to save. We also can't worry about who gets credit for what. As long as the wolves are saved, that should be all that matters. Once we can get that mindset, then the more progress we can make to fight this war. Another thing we as wolf advocates need to do is to stop playing so nice and stop compromising. For too long we have played nice and it has gotten us nowhere. It is time to step up and be more bold and more demanding. As far as ways to fight for wolves is concerned, I have to make it known from observation and personal experience that online petitions do not work, and they are ineffective. The best way to get your message to politicians is to individually contact their offices directly. Snowball your elected officials with handwritten letters, calls, and emails telling them that you want the wolves to be protected again, and even if they have to slip another legislative rider in another major bill to do it, then they need to do so. Contacting them in all three ways should be good too. Maybe even send them some of the horrifying images of the sadism being inflicted on wolves so they can see just what we see on a regular basis. If they give you an attitude, rudeness, or insults, then document it and use the media to expose them and their behavior. Politicians will also do anything to keep their seats in office. Another way to fight for wolves is to scare the politicians with a loss of votes, and be sure to hold true to your word and vote against them in the next election for what they have done to wolves and to your rights. If you're worried about the candidate from the other main party, vote for a third party. Don't go with the lesser of the two evils. What has that gotten us but an even worse situation than before? Republicans and Democrats have proven to be incompetent, and they have no interest in representing us anyway. Try an independent or Green Party candidate that will be unexpected. Plus give the third parties more viability, as well as send a clear message to the two main parties to shape up and listen to us for a change. Another thing we can do is push for the new Interior Secretary, Sally Jewell, to reinstate Endangered Species Act protections for wolves. And if she doesn't listen to us, then we push for her resignation, just like we pushed for Ken Salazar's resignation. Another way to fight for wolves is to make a sacrifice on our eating habits, maybe by boycotting the cattle industry and refusing to buy beef products. I know many of us may want a burger or a steak, but every time we buy a burger or a steak, we are actually financing and funding the extermination of wolves. The cattle ranching industry might have had the money to buy the anti-wolf legislation, but we as consumers can take that money away from them and cause them more financial ruin than that big bad 1% of livestock losses to wolves that ranchers are also compensated for will ever do. Plus, by doing this, it cuts them off from their lobbying power with government officials. We can also fight back for wolves by taking a few pages from the anti-wolf group's playbook and turning it against them. They have proven to be a very loud group, while we have been a silent majority. It's time to become a very loud and vocal majority. At Fish and Game comment meetings, if the anti-wolf people start trying to shout you down, you return the favor by showing up in large crowds and shout the anti-wolf people down twice as loud. Also find ways to publicly expose the anti-wolf side for how sadistic and corrupt they really are. If the anti-wolf side tries to scare you, don't back down. If they try to attack you or harm you in any way, it only makes us look better. Also keep in mind that you have every right to defend yourself should the situation occur. Another way to fight for wolves and get their protections back is to start a legislative lobbying fund that we all donate whatever money we can to. Thanks to the Citizens United Act, we now have the best kind of democracy that money can buy for the right price. So we can take advantage of that by starting a legislative lobbying fund and finance legislation to get wolves back the protections that never should have been pulled from them in the first place. Finally, another way to fight for wolves is to keep having rallies and protests for wolves across the country. These are just a few ideas that I am putting out there for all of you as fellow wolf advocates to try out. I am also open to ideas and brainstorming from other wolf advocates as well. If we can all unify ourselves and share and try out different ideas, then there is no telling what we can accomplish for the wolves. Things are very bad right now, but we just might be able to turn the tide if we are willing to go that extra mile. If wolf advocates fight hard enough, we can and will ensure the survival of wolves. Thank you.